Well, and I think part of it is we play to each other's strengths. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that I've necessarily changed my pedagogy or Gwen's changed hers to better. It's that we know what we're each good at, and we kind of lean into that.
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of reflection and collaboration as we seek to keep growing as teachers. This podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 119th episode of the Hallway Conversations podcast. My name is Matt Beamers.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
Our podcast is brought to you by our friends at the Center for the Advancement of Christian Education. We're always looking for topics of conversation and feedback, so please email us at hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Your feedback and ideas are important to us. The day we're recording this, friends, my daughter in BC is on a snow day, and I can assure our listeners we have gotten little to no snow this winter in Iowa.
That is true.
So, Pacific Northwest, snow. Florida, snow. Iowa, no snow.
It was the nicest day of January I've ever experienced, I think, last week.
Oh, yeah.
My children were outside in their t-shirts playing football.
Even yesterday, it was like, I don't know, in the 50s, high 40s. That's 12 or 13 degrees for our Canadian
Feels
listeners.
like spring.
Yeah.
Feels like spring.
It's too early.
It's too early. Don't believe it.
Snow is coming.
Don't
Snow is
believe it. Dave and Abby, I was reading a book recently titled Beyond High Performance, and there was a quote I read in there that I underlined. It said, "You're not made to be part of something that can only be done by you." So say it again. You're not made to be part of something that can only be done by you. It made me think of a conversation Abby and I had with our friend Kevin from British Columbia last week. He was talking about the co-teaching that was taking place in his school, and this made me wonder about the power of collaboration in teaching and the weight of loneliness that many educators feel. So I guess my question that I'm wondering about, and I'm not totally sure how to frame this, but is teaching made to be a solo project? Historically, it obviously has been. Is teaching made to be a solo project? And what difference might co-teaching make? And maybe to start, Abby, I know you are currently co-teaching right now. And can you just talk about that experience, about solo versus partnering?
Yeah. So I co-teach a course called Children's and Adolescent Literature with our friend Gwen Mara, whose office is right next door. And we teach that course to elementary and secondary majors. So all elementary majors take it. Mm-hmm. And then if students are secondary English majors, they take it. And then we have a handful of like middle school English. Oh, yeah. Yep. Endorsed people in there as well. And we co-teach it for a couple of reasons. Number one, because Gwen's expertise and my expertise kind of differ a little bit on the children's lit side and the adolescent lit side, so it makes sense for both of us to be in there. And then also because we use a co-teaching model in student teaching here at Dordt. And so we want our students to co-teach with their cooperating teachers in their student teaching experience. And therefore, we feel it's important that they get at least one co-teaching experience in their undergrad level. So Gwen and I try to be intentional. Sometimes we're better at it than others about naming the ways that we're co-teaching for students.
So you're actually like practicing different co-teaching
So
moves.
we show them the co-teaching chart at the beginning of the semester and say, this is the chart in your student teaching handbook. This is what we want you to do when you get there. So we're going to try some of these strategies in this class. We're going to try to name them for you so you can see how we're doing it. So for example, last
Very meta.
week. Very meta.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Which all of teaching in the Dordt education department is. Because
you're
teaching the pedagogy that you're trying to model, right? So last week we did a parallel teaching session where we split the class in half. And Gwen did, we have two rooms that we have access to during our class period. So I took half the class in one room, she took half the class in the other room. We did the same thing, but students are then able to get a better ratio of professor to student interactions. The groups are smaller. They were talking about a book they had read in a presentation circle, like a fishbowl conversation. And so the group was more manageable and smaller. Sometimes we do a lot of back and forth when we give lectures and presentations.
kind of like passing the baton, like
Yep.
I'll talk my part,
Yep.
I'll hand it off to you, and you talk your
Correct.
part. Yeah.
Yep. So, and those are all the advantages. It's great. Students get more than one perspective.
Yeah.
They get a better faculty to student ratio. There's more opportunities for us to speak into the things we know. The hard part is you have to plan very well.
Yeah, right.
Can you talk a little bit about that,
Yeah.
Abby?
So Gwen and I are very intentional about, we have a set planning time.
Yeah.
And we spend at least an hour, right, just going through where we're at for
Okay.
the next week.
Yep.
How are we going to break down this, this, and this? What tasks do we have? Who's doing this? Who's doing this? Whereas in my other course, I just know all of that and do all of that, and I don't have to sit down with someone and have that intentional time. So it is a commitment, and it does take a little more planning and coordination.
So on your own in some ways is more efficient
It can
in
be.
terms of your time, right? Because
Absolutely.
you know where you're going, you control it. So if a school was to think about implementing co-teaching, there would almost have to be an element of common planning time,
Absolutely.
right?
have to
Like
go
you
with it.
have to be
Have to.
able to.
And we can carve that into our schedules because of the flexibility of the nature of higher education, right?
Right.
Yeah, but at a K to 12 level, there would need to be intentional. What is
Some
this look like?
deliberation.
Yeah.
Yep. And so in student teaching, we say that. Use the planning time to plan how you're going to co-teach for the week or for the day or yeah.
No, it's good. How about you, Dave? I know.
Yeah.
I think you've had
I've done some co-teaching.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple experiences when I taught introduction to education. Once to enfold a new colleague when our friend Lisa joined our faculty, and to just help her kind of get introduced to our program. Actually, it was a really good way of doing some like new teacher induction. And that's maybe something for schools, K-12 schools, to think about. If you've got a new teacher coming on, like how do you enfold that person in? Co-teaching can be a really good way because just informally, you're going to have a lot of conversation.
Almost
about,
like a passing the baton.
Yeah.
So-
like how do we do things
Yeah.
here?
It's
right?
kind of like an I do, we do, you do.
Yes.
Sort
Yep.
of a scaffold.
And that was really good. And now our friend Barb Hoekstra teaches Intro to Ed too. So the last time I taught it, I co-taught it with her, and it was very much along those lines because knowing that she was going to be responsible for this course for the foreseeable future, she just wanted to be able to say, like, what have you done? And why did you do it that way? And so very similar to what you were describing, Abby, that sense of co-planning, you have to be really intentional about it. And so we would sit down for about an hour a week to just make sure who's doing what parts. And, oh, here's where I do my think aloud. Like, I've taught this course 20 times. Here's why I do what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, like to actually convey that to somebody else can be really helpful if you've got intentional time to do that. So I think there's different purposes, I guess is what I'm saying, right? Like in our current situation with the children's and adolescent lit, like that's a very, very intentionally designed choice to teach the course that way. I'd say in both of these cases it was a little bit more pragmatic for me, co-teaching. But it had real benefits for the folks who I was co-teaching with because I'd done it before, right?
So there's an element where especially for a newer teacher in a K to 12 setting, some serious mentoring
Oh,
Yes.
that can happen, right? Is hey, I'm not carrying this idea of like, oh, now it's my class. Someone shuts the door and it's just me in the class. Like there's actually some
I think
back
someone
and
should have
forth.
co-taught with me my first year.
Oh, I think all of us.
I think I could have used someone for the last 30 years.
I've said before that though, right? Like the shift that we've seen to having more open doors and more education professionals coming in and out of classrooms. I think the myth that the classroom was my little universe to command and control, and I would get in there with the kids and close the door, and now the magic's going to happen. It's like, that's not great necessarily. And to have other people who have expertise or who know these particular kids or can support them with things that I can't do, I think that's healthier and it's better.
Yeah.
Could you also then, as you're talking, I'm just thinking about this idea of like some of the professional development that might happen either in the planning session or even being in the classroom sessions. Like I'm sure your pedagogy isn't the same as Gwen or your pedagogy wasn't. Can you just speak about your own professional growth that came out of co-teaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is we play to each other's strengths. And so it's not that I've necessarily changed my pedagogy or Gwen's changed hers to better. It's that we know what we're each good at and we kind of lean into that. So, for example, this semester I said to her, do you care if I just rework the whole Canvas site? I like doing that.
Yeah.
Really? I'm shocked.
I'm shocked.
I'm shocked.
Canvas is our online platform.
Yes,
Abby
it
likes
is.
to lay things out just so.
Thank you for reworking mine this summer.
Yeah. And because there had been some comments the last time we taught it, like some things were tricky to navigate, or students couldn't find some things, or some things were inconsistent. So I'm like, I'm just going to do a little bit of an overhaul. She was like, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did that, and anything that like was a change to the way we had done things, we talked about.
Yeah.
But that was something that I could do. She emails the library every week, right? And talks about which books need to be pulled. She knows our collection, especially
well.
on the children's lit side, better than I do.
Yep.
So she's the one who takes care of most of that. So in some ways, it's great because you can each play to the things that you're good at, and then you can also, inside the class, learn from the moves that each other is doing. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do things the same way,
Yeah.
but you can
Play off each other.
play
a
off
bit?
each other. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you find that it takes a certain level of humility for yourself to
It
do
does.
this? Because that's my experience too. It's like I have my way that I would like to do things, and I have to be willing to say, but my way's not the only way. Yeah?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I even
hold things
thought,
loosely.
Right.
I even thought about that. I was in my office and I heard you teaching last week, and really great class. And part of me is just like, I just want to see what's going on in there. And we just ended up having this spontaneous discussion about different.
It was a professional discussion
It was a
in front of the
professional-
students.
yeah.
That's so good, you guys.
Totally,
I
and
love that.
we totally approach, pedagogy or all of it just
Yeah.
different. But it was, I
Yeah.
think it was this.
It was basically a traditionalism versus constructivism
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
And I tend to come from a more traditional point of view, and I think I could say that to the students, like what I've learned from Abby in terms of all the protocols that I use since I started teaching here, because of the people that I get to work with,
Yeah.
right? And then to talk that out spontaneously. And I just think if you're co-teaching, you actually can have, it was a bit playful, but it was also serious. And I think you're even modeling what does healthy relationships look like.
Right. And that teaching doesn't look the same. Good teaching can look very different.
Yeah.
Right? There's not one way.
Right. Oh, that's healthy to keep that in mind, right? There's a
It
lot of
is.
ways to do this work right, and
Yeah.
very few to do it absolutely wrong,
Right.
There's ways
Right.
that it might be more or less effective, but there's lots of ways to do it right.
Another, just taking a different direction, thinking about a lot of conversation that's happening in schools around retention and recruitment of teachers, or we all know teachers who are struggling with burnout. I'm not saying this is the answer. Maybe it's not, because like you said, there's a good amount of work that needs to go into it. Do you find, or is there the potential that co-teaching might help with burnout, or by sharing to use your term, Dave, sharing the emotional labor of teaching? There's no one solution, and maybe it wouldn't be helpful at all. But I'm just wondering, is there potential that this could help with teacher burnout? Like one part of, I don't know, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, because I personally have found it very energizing to collaborate with a colleague, right? And I wonder if that's situational just for me. I mean, maybe it's personal because of the way that I'm wired up, that I like I like this kind of thing, actually,
Right.
like sitting
Right.
down and talking about our practices. And maybe this isn't for everybody. I don't want to assume that because we're doing this and I like it, every teacher would do that. But it is very energizing for me to think about my practice at that level, to say, here's what I'm doing and here's why I want to do it this way, and to be able to have a true collegial interaction. Not just, I've said this before on the podcast, there's a difference between being congenial and being collegial, right?
Right.
Like a lot of teachers are real good at just being nice to each other. To really be collegial, it's an iron sharpens iron kind of thing, and that doesn't mean we're always going to agree, and so you have to navigate some of that. But the overall, I think it is, to your point, Nat, I think it is encouraging, and it is life-giving, and it is maybe something that could help you move past if you're starting to feel burned out.
And I think too, sometimes we're in the business of placing student teachers, and I think sometimes part of the reason mentor teachers don't like to take on a student teacher is it feels like one more thing to do sometime, right? One other thing to be responsible for, or you feel a sense of ownership over your class that you don't want to give up, right? And I can relate to that as a teacher.
Right.
But I also think, there's been many, many times where I've seen that relationship benefit the mentor just as much as the student. in that situation, right? Because students can bring new ideas, different perspectives. There can be opportunities like we talked about for stations or for parallel teaching or for one-on-one instruction that can really enhance a classroom in ways that one person alone can't do it, and just that exchange of ideas, right? And I think too I have to give a shout out to my son's second grade teachers last year, right, at Rock Valley Christian. I was invited in, all the parents are invited in to do like a science-y experiment with the second graders. And they don't do a true co-teaching model. They each have their own class, but they do different things throughout the day together. This is one of those things. So they co-plan one piece of their science instruction, and they put the two sections together, and they do this experiment together, right? So it doesn't, and I know they do more things like that, even though they're teaching in their different rooms. That can be another way to co-teach, right? To co-plan a grade level or to co-plan a certain subject at a grade level.
Right.
Just to bounce ideas off each other.
As you're describing that, I'm thinking back to when I taught at Sioux Center Christian years and years ago, and my great partner in crime, Steve Kroll, who was a middle school math teacher, I was a middle school science teacher. Similarly, we would intentionally co-teach a couple of units every year where it was kind of an engineering unit.
Yep.
So they're bringing some things from their math class, they're bringing things from their science class, and then we'd have them design something, build something. And it would take like a week. So, I mean, it was like a substantial commitment of our time to plan and prepare and do that. But what a benefit. And those are the kinds of projects that I'm sure the students, like if you'd ask these kids from 20 years ago, the kinds of things that they remember from that, I suspect
so you can
those
go
are the things.
interdisciplinary as well as across grade levels, right?
And those were very energizing for both. I won't speak for Steve, he's not here to defend himself, but for both of us, I think those were very energizing things. And like in the doldrums of February, that's a really good time to plan something that's going to shake up your teaching. The kids kind of get into it. For me, it kind of shakes me out of the doldrums too.
Yeah. I can remember a number of years ago seeing a high school English teacher and science teacher. They studied the Lorax and they studied ecology.
Oh, yeah.
And they kind of did this and it was just really, and I think it's helpful for students. They're like, oh, like what we're talking about, which I think what we're talking about in here actually is related to what we're talking about in here, which I think probably happens more than even what they realize. But it was just really intentional to see how these things come together. I'm also just thinking about this idea of co-teaching, promoting, or enhancing inclusive education at a K to 12. I'm just wondering what comes to mind when I say the potential of co-teaching and a more inclusive classroom or meeting diverse needs. Just Abby, thoughts on that?
I do think that that's a really powerful way. If you can have, I was just talking to a student in my office last week who has a special education major and an elementary major.
Yeah.
She's a double major, and she's trying to decide which job she's going to apply for, right? Whether she's going to be a K-6 elementary teacher or whether she's going to apply for a special education
She's going to have a really hard
job.
time getting a job.
Yeah, right?
Impossible.
I filled out quite a few online inquiries already. But anyways, so we were talking through that and what that looks like at different institutions. And one of the things I told her to look for was, in a special ed job, will you get a chance to collaborate with the general education teachers?
Yeah.
Or will it be they come to your room and that's where the education takes place? Or will you be able to push in? Will you be able to meet with the gen ed teachers and say, here's an idea. Here's something you can use that will benefit this student, but also other students. And will you have a chance to co-teach? Because I think that is so powerful for not only the students in special education, but also everyone in the room.
Oh, yeah. Everybody benefits.
Yes.
Right? You've got two teachers, two minds at work in this classroom, right? It's only going to help.
And she agreed. She's like, that's what I would love to do. And so I said, look for a job like that.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say one of the potential risks of co-teaching is if there's not chemistry between the teachers?
I think that matters.
Okay, can you talk about that a little, Dave?
Well, so I've only ever had good experiences co-teaching.
Yeah.
But the folks who I've co-taught with, all of us had an openness to approaching this, right? And I think it really requires that. This is my read of it. If you have someone who does not want to do this, it's not going to go well, right? If it's foisted on, if it's not something you're like, hey, I'll play, I'll try this out, I think that's going to be a hard thing. So there's a mindset aspect to it, right? And different folks are going to have different tolerance for that kind of ambiguity. That maybe and as much planning and preparation as you do for co-teaching.
And you have to be secure in your own practice.
Right.
If you have insecurities.
It's going to surface them immediately.
Correct.
Right?
And we all have some insecurities, but you have to not allow them to hijack the experience.
So a school leader who's maybe wondering about could we have some early adopters around co-teaching? Don't assume that you can just put two people, even two people that might get along really well.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
There's,
but almost
there's a
like
level of
like almost some different gifts, like not all like an open-mindedness, but also they're going to bring some different gifts to the table. I mean, you talked about that with you and Gwen. Hey, like one of the reasons it works well is our strengths are in different. Like we have a similar vision, but strengths in different areas. Friends, we know that your time is valuable and want to thank you for joining us today for another hallway conversation. Whether it's this day, this week, this month, or this year, we hope the Lord gives you what you stand in need of. And we'd like to send you from here with this blessing. So to our listeners, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace and give you peace and give you peace. Amen. Thanks for listening, everybody. We hope you have a wonderful week.
This podcast was literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Hey, we have a favor to ask of you. Would you be willing to rate this podcast or write a review in your podcast app? Or if you found this conversation interesting or helpful, would you consider sharing it on your social media? Those things really do help podcasters out, and we would be so, so grateful. Thanks for listening, friends.
So you guys, I started the solo podcast thing too, and not at the cost of this, but it's like grant funded. That's been a lot of fun, but oh my goodness, it takes so much more time to do a scripted show because I have like this whole process of writing a script and then I edit it.
It's like scripted.
And so I'm
different, I bet.
I'm making like 7 to 10 minute episodes for it, and it takes me like 2 hours to do a 7 to 10 minute episode. I'm like,
You'll get faster.
I took this on, and now I'm like,
Yeah. And how often are you doing it?
So the plan is I'm just going to drop a season at a time. So to do like 10 episodes on a theme, and then just like, there it is. So this first one is like, what is matter? Like all the stuff about atoms and molecules and elements and stuff. I've got 5 more episodes to record. I've got it all written. I've got all the
But you just got to do it.
Like get my butt in the chair in front of the microphone. And so over the weekend, that was part of what I did. We cleaned out our storage room, and I recorded like 4 podcast episodes. And
That's awesome.
that was it. So
Good for you.
Yep. Yeah, I'm feeling good about it. But
Good.